Orleans Pelicans, they, of course, will be without Zion Williamson for the foreseeable future with that hamstring injury. And at DraftKings right now, New Orleans a home 1.5-point underdog.
The way that the Pelicans looked without Zion Williamson, I mean, we're talking about Zion Williamson scored 40 points on 27 shooting with 11 rebounds. He was +3 in terms of his individual plus-minus. Brandon Ingram on the floor, they were -16. CJ McCollum on the floor, they were -17. I mean, Brandon Ingram got benched, and when Zion Williamson went out, they didn't even go back to him because they didn't really trust that or his health. So
we talked about the Pelicans and how ugly it was for Brandon Ingram. First game since March 21st. Willie Green yesterday seemed a little bit more optimistic about the performance from Brandon Ingram, maybe shaking off that rust. And then I look at CJ McCollum, who shot 42% from three, and he was 1 of 9 from three. So do we see CJ McCollum bounce back and at least have a decent shooting night as opposed to a dreadful one that he had the other evening?
For a guy like CJ McCollum, you would think that you'd be able to come in and turn things around just given the history. Same thing with Brandon Ingram. But we got to give your opponent credit here when you're talking about Sacramento. I mean, Sacramento looked very good defensively. Keon Ellis was hounding Steph Curry throughout that entire game. His defense, along with their scheme as a whole, is a big reason why Golden State is gone, right? They were awesome defensively. So I think that when you look at the ability here for Sacramento, not only because they have the edge in health, but because they have some pretty solid perimeter defenders with Keon Ellis leading the way, he's going to be hounding C.J. McCollum this entire time. That's where you would think that even if the bounce back is just like, hey, just in general, he's a good player, he should come back down to earth, or I guess rise back to earth, considering how bad he was. It would make some sense that this New Orleans team continues to struggle on offense like we saw in those last 3 minutes because of the ability of guys like Keon Ellis and others for Sacramento to play defensively.
Just for tonight, we know there's no Zion, and he was playing maybe the best game of his life against the Los Angeles Lakers. He was unstoppable, and who knows if he has stayed healthy, if they win that game, very well could have. But do we see Sacramento missing my ginger brother Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk, who probably would have been sixth man of the year if he doesn't get hurt?
Still could
tonight.
Probably finish. I think he's actually getting a lot of votes. No, I don't necessarily think that that's going to be like super impactful here. New Orleans is a really good defensive team, and so maybe you see it a little bit, but I think they've really gotten comfortable with this. They've kind of understood what everything is. This isn't like New Orleans where you just lost them 2 days ago, and now you got to figure this thing out. This has been what they've been rolling with for a while, and they're comfortable with what their new roles are now at this point. So I think that you're not going to see much of a drop-off here. What's going to be fascinating really is where does the scoring come from New Orleans in terms of like shot attempts, the proliferation of those attempts that Zion Williamson was going to take, who's going to take those? And, we were talking about this the other day, but a guy like Trey Murphy III is going to be incredible. 31 points off of the bench for New Orleans in the loss to Los Angeles, but 5 of 10 from the floor, 2 of 6 from three-point range. He had scored 12 points, but very impactful. Somebody like him who can be really, really good for them, I think is live to be pretty active. We talked about that actually the other day. So I think that when you look overall, like that's going to be the more fascinating storyline is where does the rest of the offense come from in terms of shot attempts and work volume? We saw Jose Alvarado down the stretch burning D'Angelo Russell in that play-in game. How much run does he get here? Because he ended up closing that game out for the New Orleans Pelicans at 25 minutes in the contest.
Now, a lot of this is correlated to the officialness of Zion being out, but the total in this one moved from 219.5 at open at DraftKings all the way down to where it stands right now at 210. So a lot of movement towards the under in both of these games, most notably New Orleans and Sacramento.